In this edition of Spreadsheet Geek, we're going to take a look at using Scenario Manager. Scenario Manager is found under Excel's Data menu under What If Analysis. If you have a worksheet set up with input cells and output cells, and you want to show different versions of it with different sets of inputs, you might consider using Scenario Manager to track your different versions. Using Scenario Manager may be easier than creating a different worksheet for each version of your plan or problem. This video was made using Microsoft Excel 2019. Before you can use Scenario Manager, you need some inputs and some output cells. So I'm going to create a simple plan for 10 years of investing. And I'm going to call my risk on this plan medium. This is the medium plan. My beginning principal is going to be $10,000. That's what I've got right now. I'm going to assume that I can save $6,000 every year into the future, and that $6,000 will actually grow at a rate of 10% a year. So in the second year, I'll save $6,000, and then third year, I'll save $6,600, and so forth. I'm going to allocate 60% of my principal to stocks and 40% to bonds. I expect a return of 7.5% from the stock market, and let's just say 3% from the bond market. So we're going to rebalance this portfolio once a year, and the annual savings will be injected right at the beginning of the year. That's our investment scenario. Now let's map it out. So here's a little 10-year roadmap. We'll map out our investing result on this shaded area here. So in the first year, we're not going to have any additional savings, so we'll mark that as 0. And in starting with the second year, we're going to save $6,000 a year. So I'm going to set that equal to 6,000. In the third year, we said that this 6,000 would go up by another 10%. So we're going to save whatever we had in this year times 1 plus our additional 10%. And I'm going to go ahead and fix that reference. So we save $6,600 in the third year, and that's just going to go up at a rate of 10% a year for the 10 years. Now let's take a look at our January 1st balance. We said we were going to start with a beginning principal of $10,000, so I'm going to set that equal to this value. And our allocation to stocks that we'll set up on January 1st of that first year is going to equal $10,000 times 60%. And the return we expect to get is going to be 1 plus our rate of return. $6,450 by the end of the year. Our allocation to bonds is going to be very similar, 10,000 times our rate of our allocation to bonds times 1 plus our rate of return on the bonds. So by the end of the first year, we have $10,570. At least that's our plan. So let's map out the second year. My January 1st balance will be equal to my ending balance from this year plus what I saved up during the year. So that'll be my principal for rebalancing. And my stock and bond allocations should transfer over. So now I'm in a position to autofill this over. And we'll see that our ending balance after 10 years is about $122,000. So how much did we actually save 81 plus the original 10. So we turned about $91,000 into $122,000 over 10 years and adding it in year after year. Let's say after I did this medium risk scenario, I want to show a low risk scenario with different inputs in this gray area here. And the whole thing will recompute with a different set of numbers. One alternative is to create a copy of this worksheet. I could put it in the same workbook and then go in on that second worksheet and change the numbers and then create a third and so on. That is a viable alternative, and it's advantageous in one way because you can get from one sheet to another with a simple one mouse click. The disadvantage is that if you make changes to your formulas or your formats or your wording on some of these labels on one of your worksheets, you have to go in and change it manually on the others. Scenario Manager takes care of that for you. Let's see how it works. The first thing I want to do is save this medium risk scenario as one of my scenarios. So under the data menu, I'm going to go to What If Analysis, and Scenario Manager is the first option. It opens up a dialog box. We're going to add a scenario. Let's call this one medium risk. You have to identify your changing cells. So the easiest way to do this is to click this little arrow, hold down the control key, and you just have to get them all. I'm going to release the mouse. I'm going to click the mouse again here and drag it over these four. So I have 7 changing cells altogether, and I've just identified them right here. And actually C2 was already initialized because that was the selected cell when I went in. So I'm going to take out C2. I don't need to have that twice. Now there's an opportunity to give a little comment here. I don't typically use it, but we'll just call this 60-40 stocks to bonds. And we'll say okay. So Scenario Manager brings up this scenario values dialog box, and you have an opportunity to change any of these one last time. It's just a little odd because you have 1 through 5 here, and that's medium through 0.6. So that's medium through 0.6. And if you scroll down, you would expect to see 6, 7, and 8, or actually 5, 6, and 7, but it keeps this 1 through 5 over here to the left, which is really kind of confusing, even though these are the 5th, 6th, and 7th values I've identified. So that's a little weird, a little strange, but maybe they'll fix that in the next version of Excel. So I'm going to hit OK. I now have a medium risk scenario saved, and I can show it and close this. So until we have a second scenario plugged in, that's all we're going to have. Let's plug in a second scenario. So my second scenario is going to be low risk. Let's type that in. I'm going to keep the same beginning principal and annual savings, but let's say this goes down to 5%. We're being more conservative here, and let's go with a 40-60 allocation of stocks to bonds. And let's be a little more conservative on our return. We'll say it's 7% and 2%. So all of our numbers changed and we have a lower result. It's a lower risk scenario. So let's save this one under Scenario Manager. I'm going to add a scenario. My scenario name is going to be low risk. It's already got the changing cells identified from the other one. I'm going to wipe out this comment and I'm going to call this one 40-60 stocks to bonds, and okay. I get a chance to look over my values that I already plugged in, and they look good, so I'm going to say OK. And while we're at it, let's just add another scenario right from the dialog box. So on that second scenario, the low risk one, I went back to the worksheet, plugged in the values, and saved the scenario. You can also add a scenario right from here. We'll call this one high risk. Changing cells are the same. And let's make this one 80% stocks, 20% bonds. So I'll call this 80-20. And I get an opportunity to change here. I'm going to call this high. Same principle, same annual savings. Let's be more aggressive here, and I'll put in 15%. We're going to allocate 80% to stocks in B8. And we'll say the expected stock market return on this one is 10%. We're going to allocate, of course, 20% to bonds in B9 here. And let's say the return on the bonds, we'll go with 3%. Let's make it 4. We'll get some junk bonds. So that's okay. So we now have 3 scenarios to choose from. So every time you open this workbook, you can jump over to Scenario Manager and select a different scenario, and the numbers will change. One thing I should point out, when you open up a workbook with different scenarios saved, there's no real visual cue for anybody to know unless they go looking under Scenario Manager, and they'll see them saved there. So that's one thing that I'm not too crazy about. It would be nice if there was something to tell the worksheet recipient what was going on. Another thing I don't like about it is, although it takes one mouse click to shift to another sheet, it takes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to shift to a different scenario. So if you're up in front of a group of people, briefing them on different scenarios, you may want to take that into account. Before I forget, you can have, I'm told by Excel, an unlimited number of scenarios in a workbook. But the number of different changing cells is limited to 32. To wrap it up, I'm just going to go show one more thing. So it would be nice when you change from one scenario to another. I'm going from low to high risk. Look at the screen. The numbers change, but nothing else changes. So it's kind of nice to use conditional formatting in conjunction with scenarios. And I'm going to show you a way to do that. I'm going to set this up so that all of these cells are shaded in a different color when it's on high risk scenario. So how do you do that? Go to the Home menu, Conditional Formatting, and we're going to set a new rule for these cells. And the rule type I'm going to choose from is use a formula to determine which cells to format. And I'm going to type in a rule here. So the thing that changes that I want the shading down here to be dependent upon, I think the obvious choice is, rather than use any of these numbers, I'm going to use this word. So I'm going to say equals $C $2 equals, and put it in quotes, high. If that says high, and I made a mistake there, that should be a 2. I'm going to format these cells in, let me see, high risk is kind of hot, so let's go with a nice orange. OK. So now I have high risk is orange, and if I jump back to medium risk, should still be green. Yes, it is. So why don't we make another rule for these same cells under conditional formatting? One more rule. Same rule. $C, $2 equals, for the low risk, we'll set that format to a low risk color like blue. So now when I switch this over to low risk, it should turn blue. And if I go back to medium risk, it's green. If I go to high risk, it's orange. That's a way to incorporate some change other than the numbers into your different scenarios. There's a few other things I didn't mention that are worth mentioning. When you go into Scenario Manager, if you just click on an alternate scenario, nothing happens out here on the worksheet. But if you double click on it, you can actually get them to change over when you've got this dialog box open. Another option on here is the merge option. If you had, for example, multiple departments and department heads submitting their budgets to you and you were tasked with putting them all together, you can actually merge multiple worksheets into a single scenario. So that's what that's for. But everybody has to be using the same cells for the same items in their budget. And finally, there's a summary option here. You can summarize the output of your scenario in a simple way with scenario summary. We'll run one of those. You have to designate a result cell. So for us, that is K16. I'm going to leave that where it is. And if you click that, you get a new worksheet put into your workbook called Scenario Summary. And it's got your current summary here as well as all the others with the 7 or 8 actually variable cells shown for each of them and the end result for the cell you designated. These are not dynamic. This is never going to change. These are just numbers in a cell. So take that for what it's worth. And one thing I don't like about it is the labels all need to be changed. If you're going to use this, you should fill in that this is the allocation to stocks and bonds and so forth. And if you go back to that summary option and you choose the pivot table option, I'm going to leave the result cells on K16 as it was. You get another worksheet put into your workbook, and this time it's in a pivot table format. So you have some options there, but I'm not going to go into that today. If you found the content of this video interesting and informative, please consider becoming one of my subscribers. Thanks for visiting Spreadsheet Geek.